Week 11 has come and gone in the college football landscape. Let's get right to the rankings for the college football playoff picture as we see it shaping up. The committee's going to go into their little room, talk about what they want to talk about. We understand that. We're going to give you the rankings right now for how this whole race is shaping up. Our first two out and then our top four. We waste no time. We get right to it. At number 6 for us this week, LSU. Now, we had them at number 6 last week ahead of Oregon. Turns out we ended up being right on that. We'll pat ourselves on the back later. But LSU, like a hot bottle of water, when you're dying of thirst, not necessarily your favorite thing, but you got what you needed. They beat Arkansas on the road in a less than pretty fashion. Harold Perkins is an absolute man-child. We've already talked about him in another video, but he is a dog. He's a chess piece for them going forward. Here's the important piece about that for them, for LSU. They have now secured themselves a spot in the SEC title game. So take care of business, get to Atlanta with 2 losses. Guess what you get? A date with Georgia. So the path into LSU is pretty narrow, right? Like you probably need some other teams to lose to be in the college football playoff when all the dust settles. But I would say this. While a 2-loss team has never made the college football playoff, an SEC champ has never been left out. And if they were to get there with 2 losses, like I said, assuming they don't drop any other games the rest of the way, if they were to somehow connect on a solid punch and beat Georgia, dare I say beat Georgia convincingly, I think you could see a scenario where LSU finds a way to creep in. Again, I think style points are crucial. The game will sort of play itself out. I'm excited to see what happens with LSU the rest of the way because they have surged emphatically. But for us, they're number 6 on this week's rankings. At number 5, the Tennessee Vols just sitting there at number 5. 5 ranked wins, the best loss in the country, if we want to use that kind of verbiage that the committee likes to use. They beat the brakes off Missouri. Let's call it what it is. They beat the brakes off Missouri, and they acquired some of those style points on senior day. If you're Tennessee, you're rooting for a TCU loss, right? Like that would really help your case a lot. Nonetheless, making the conversation when you get to Selection Sunday is going to be crucial because you're not playing for an SEC title. So we'll leave it at that. But Tennessee continuing to handle business, really impressed with how they responded after their loss last week at Georgia. But Tennessee, again, they're sitting there with 5 ranked wins and the best loss in the country. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, we would love to have you along for the ride. We've had a lot of you, whether you're from, the Michigan fan base, LSU fan base, Oregon fan base, whether you're an Ohio State fan, Georgia, whatever it is, you catch my drift. We want you here. We want you a part of this for the people, by the people. Subscribe to the channel. Every single thing that you know and love about college football happens here every single day. All right, thank you. Also, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JD Piquel. We move forward. At number 4, no surprise here, TCU got a tough win over Texas on the road. And I was impressed by TCU because typically we've seen the offense just kind of spearhead this thing and lead the charge in the second half as they kind of have a comeback kind of win typically from TCU, which is funny to say, a typical comeback fashion kind of win is what we expected from them. But that wasn't what we got yesterday in Austin, was it? Saw a TCU team play gritty, play tough, play really well defensively. Max Duggan threw for less than 200 yards, around 124. Quentin Johnston, your best player on the field, going to be a high NFL draft pick, had only 3 catches, and they still found a way to get it done. So, with that being said, TCU, you have a game in Waco against Baylor next weekend. It's a rivalry game. You play Iowa State at home to finish the year. Then you got the Big 12 title game, which you have officially locked up a spot in. The main thing stays the main thing for TCU. Win and you're in. Handle business and you're going dancing this week, the number 4 for us. Number 3, we got Michigan. They beat Nebraska. I compare them to a python. It's slow and it's consistent and it just squeezes the life out of you when you play Michigan. That run game compounds. The defense gives you nothing. Before you know it, you're in the third quarter and the game's out of hand and you've lost the will to compete. That's the kind of effect Michigan's had on teams. And that formula has continued to work, and I believe they're ramping up to allow J.J. McCarthy to push the ball downfield a little bit more when they play Ohio State. You would hope that's the case. Now, Illinois lost yesterday. And that hurts Michigan from a resume perspective. But again, the path is still the same as it was when we talked about this in August. If Michigan goes undefeated, wins in Columbus against Ohio State, which is a tall task, but they'll be up for it. If they win that game, you would imagine the winner of that game wins the Big Ten championship. You go undefeated, you're dealing with a 1 or a 2 seed, right? It's kind of the fact of the matter. At number 2, we have Ohio State, and they beat Indiana soundly. I think they acquired some style points, in my mind at least, just being able to win by that margin, take care of business, and look dominant, especially from what we saw from them a week ago against Northwestern. Encouraging to see that. They're at Maryland next week. The same thing is true for them as it was for Michigan. They're on a collision course. I don't know how else to say this in a creative way. That game will decide a college football playoff spot for one of those teams. It's looking less and less like there'll be room for both Michigan and Ohio State, like we maybe thought there was at one point in the year. It's a sudden death match. Both teams ramping up for it. The game at Maryland could be a game that's like a look-ahead spot, but excited to see how they respond this week and excited to see what they do on the road in that kind of environment and that kind of spot, rather, is what I'm more interested to see. But Ohio State, done nothing for us to drop them a spot. They're still number 2 for us in this week's rankings. At number 1, no changes. The Georgia Bulldogs, the undisputed heavyweight champs at this point in time. So good at managing the internal. And they showed it again yesterday. Beat up on Mississippi State in a spot that would have been a letdown for anybody else in the country. Likely not for Georgia, not for Kirby Smart. They're continuing to fine-tune the machine. Locked up a spot in the SEC title game. Kirby Smart didn't even sound happy about it. He said, we got to get to the next week. We got to be able to get after Kentucky. And Kirby Smart and Georgia are going to be a problem for everybody else. So to recap, number 6, we got LSU. Number 5, we got Tennessee. At number 4, we have TCU, who is still unbeaten, still kicking. Number 3, we got Michigan. Number 2, we got Ohio State. Those two will play each other. They're on a collision course for a big game in Columbus. Then at number 1, we have the Georgia Bulldogs yet again as the number 1 ranked team in the country. So again, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you. Again, follow me on social media at JD Pakel on Twitter and Instagram. We can interact there, do a lot of things there that we incorporate here. Also do some content over there that we don't do here, including some gambling picks. We're heating up a little bit. Nick Brake doing the real heavy lifting. Would love to have you along for the ride. We're going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.